In the ultrasound room, I heard two babies quarreling. One whined softly, "Brother, stop crowding me." The other snarled aggressively, "Get lost, this is my spot." I asked the doctor excitedly, "Are they twins?" But the doctor glanced at my husband behind me, then shook his head at me. "Elena, you're mistaken, there's only one gestational sac." My husband Theo chuckled as he put his arm around me. "Look at you, so overjoyed you're seeing things." "Really?" But I could clearly hear that fierce voice sneering. "At least he knows what's best. If he dares to spill the beans, Dad definitely won't let him off." Back home, sitting on the sofa, I couldn't stop thinking about the phrase, "He knows what's good for him." Dad? Which dad? I caressed my belly, my palms icy cold, as a terrifying thought took root in my heart. Theo came over carrying a cup of warm milk and thoughtfully placed it beside me. "What's wrong, still thinking about the twins?" "Don't overthink it. The doctor said there's only one, so let's just focus on taking good care of this one." His smile was gentle, his eyes full of affection, just like when I first met him. I lowered my gaze, hiding the coldness in my eyes, and obediently took the milk. Hypocrite. I picked up the milk and pretended to ask casually. "Theo, a friend of mine is pregnant too, and she's expecting twins. You know, it would be so wonderful if we also had two babies." I stared intently at his face, not wanting to miss any expression. Theo's hand, holding the cup, paused ever so slightly, a motion almost too quick to notice. "Twins come with too many risks. I just want you and the baby to be safe and sound." His voice remained gentle, yet it was tinged with tension. I lowered my head, a cold smile curving at the corner of my lips, one he couldn't see. "So that's how it is." That night, I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. Theo walked in quietly, thinking I was fast asleep. He stood by the bedside for a long time, so long that I almost couldn't keep up the pretense. Then, I felt his icy fingers gently resting on my stomach. Not the kind of affectionate touch filled with paternal love from usual days. His fingers, carrying a sense of evaluation and measurement, traced inch by inch, as if calculating something. My entire body stiffened, and I dared not even breathe heavily. That soft, gentle voice sounded with a sob, "Brother, I'm scared." A fierce male voice immediately soothed, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Then, he said to the other baby in my belly, "You'd better behave too, don't let him find you." My heart skipped a beat. Him? Who is he? Theo? What can he possibly discover? Just then, I heard Theo let out a very soft sigh, filled with regret, before turning and walking out of the room. I suddenly opened my eyes and touched the place he had touched, it was ice cold. The next day, Theo told me he had replaced my phone with a new one. "Low radiation, better for the baby," he said with a smile. I looked at the senior phone, whose functions were so basic it could only make calls and send texts, and sneered inwardly. Is it because there's less radiation, or is it easier to monitor? He took my old phone and skillfully formatted everything. Out with the old, in with the new. He acted so naturally, as if he were just disposing of a piece of garbage. My heart sank little by little. Not even 2 days later, my mother-in-law, Victoria, the matriarch of the Harrington family, suddenly moved into our villa. She brought along an entire team, a nutritionist, a nanny, and 2 expressionless bodyguards. She claimed it was all to take better care of me. "Elena, starting today, your daily meals will be handled by Karen. She's the most professional nutritionist for pregnancy." My mother-in-law sat on the sofa and spoke in a commanding tone. I looked at the woman named Karen, who adjusted her glasses with a sharp gaze. My life was completely taken over. I couldn't go out, couldn't see friends, and my daily activities were confined to this villa. Theo would come back to see me every day, showering me with care and concern. But to me, all that affection was laced with deadly poison. The fierce baby seemed to sense the danger as well. "That old witch is up to no good. She's been adding something to the soup she gives you. It's a small amount, but she's been putting it in consistently. My hand holding the soup bowl was as steady as a rock, and I even gave my mother-in-law a sycophantic smile. "Thank you, Mom. The soup is delicious." As I drank, I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye, and my mother-in-law's lips curved upward in satisfaction. I tilted my head back and finished the soup in one gulp. Then, I excused myself to use the bathroom, rushed into the bathroom, and forced myself to vomit by sticking my fingers down my throat. Only after I had vomited until nothing but stomach acid remained did I slump to the ground. I couldn't afford to just sit and wait. I had to reach out to the outside world. I remembered I had a spare phone, hidden in an old suitcase tucked away at the very back of the closet. Taking advantage of the gap in the shift change of the bodyguards, I slipped into the cloakroom and locked the door from the inside. I dug out that phone. Good, it still had battery. Frantically, I called my best friend Chloe. The phone was answered after just one ring. "Elena." Hearing Chloe's voice, I nearly burst into tears. "Chloe, I had only uttered 3 words when suddenly, the door of the walk-in closet was violently kicked open from outside. My mother-in-law stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 bodyguards, a cold smile playing on her face. "Elena, who are you calling?" She walked toward me step by step, her high heels tapping on the floor, each sound resonating like a footfall on my heart. Instinctively, I tried to hide my phone behind my back. She didn't give me a chance to react. With just one look from her, the bodyguard beside her rushed forward and roughly snatched my phone away. Mother-in-law took the phone and glanced at the name on the screen. "Chloe?" She gave a light laugh. "It seems I've been too good to you, letting you forget your place." With that, she threw the phone hard onto the ground right in front of me. The screen shattered instantly into countless pieces. Still unsatisfied, she lifted her foot and ground it into the phone with her expensive custom-made high heels. "Anyone or anything that might disturb your pregnancy, I'll take care of it for you." After saying that, she turned and walked away, as if the fierce woman just now was not her at all. I looked at the shattered phone on the ground, feeling my blood run cold all over. I was completely imprisoned. In the evening, Theo came back, and my mother-in-law told him about the incident. I thought he would at least say a word in my defense. But he just listened in silence, then walked up to me and knelt down. "Elena, Mom is doing this for your own good. Right now, the most important thing for you is to rest and nurture the baby, try not to overthink." His voice was as gentle as a pool of water, yet it sent a bone-chilling cold through me. I looked at him and asked, word by word, "Theo, I'm your wife, not a tool for your family to raise children." The gentleness on his face began to crack. "How can you think like that? I love you, Elena." "Love?" "His love is about locking you up, and killing one of your children." The fierce baby sneered inside my stomach. I closed my eyes, not wanting to look at his hypocritical face anymore. From that day on, they tightened their supervision over me. 2 bodyguards stayed by my room door without leaving for a moment. Even when I went to the bathroom, I wasn't allowed to close the door. I began to starve myself. This was the only way I could resist. On the first day, my mother-in-law watched coldly. On the second day, she started to threaten me. "Elena, don't push your luck. If you starve my grandson, I'll make sure your whole family suffers with you. My parents are my only weakness." With red eyes, I glared at her. "Don't you dare. See if I dare." She tossed over some documents. "Your parents' little restaurant seems to have failed its recent health inspection." I was trembling with anger. I had no choice but to compromise. I started eating, but each bite felt like swallowing knives. I had to think of a way. I couldn't let them succeed. A plan slowly took shape in my mind. That afternoon, I quietly poured some body wash on the bathroom floor while the nanny wasn't paying attention. Then, I accidentally slipped and fell heavily. "Ah!" I let out a cry of pain, clutching my stomach. The nanny was terrified, her face turning pale as she screamed and ran out to call for help. Soon, both Theo and my mother-in-law rushed in. Seeing me on the ground with faint traces of blood beneath me, Theo's face instantly turned ashen. Quick! Call the family doctor. Mother-in-law shouted. My heart sank. The family doctor again. I was betting they would panic and take me to the nearest public hospital. I lost the bet. But my mind raced, thinking about how to use this injury to create the next opportunity. Dr. Liam Reed arrived soon. He ran a series of tests on me, then shook his head at Theo and mother-in-law. Madam, sir, the lady's fall was quite serious, it has disturbed the pregnancy chi, and she must rest immediately. I recommend giving her some nutrient fluid to stabilize the fetus. I lay in bed, my entire body ice cold. I heard that fierce voice angrily cursing inside my stomach. Stupid woman. Do you think they're fools? This kind of self-inflicted injury plot will only make them intensify their cruelty. I closed my eyes in despair. The cold liquid dripped down the foretube, slowly entering my body. Soon, an intense drowsiness washed over me. My eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Just before completely losing consciousness, I heard that soft, milky little voice choked with tears, "Brother, I feel so unwell. My body is burning hot." Immediately following that was the furious roar of the fierce male voice. Damn it. They're drugging it. This drug is aimed at me. They're trying to kill me. My consciousness was drifting in darkness, but my body felt as if it were on fire. No, I can't fall asleep. With all my strength, I bit down hard on the tip of my tongue. The sharp pain brought me back to my senses a little. I opened my eyes, the room was empty. A cold liquid was still being steadily infused into my veins through the back of my hand. This was the thing trying to kill my child. With my other hand that wasn't pricked, trembling, I yanked out the needle from the back of my hand. The excruciating pain caused a blackout before my eyes, while deep within my veins burned a tearing sensation. Ignoring the pain, I scrambled out of bed and rushed into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water over my face again and again, trying to keep myself awake. The drug was very potent, my body grew hotter and hotter, but my limbs began to go weak. Inside my belly, that fierce voice also grew feeble. Hold on, stupid woman, don't fall asleep. Leaning against the cold wall, I slid down to sit on the floor, gasping heavily. Not long after, urgent footsteps came from outside. Elena. Open the door. Elena. It was Theo's voice, full of panic. I didn't make a sound. Break the door open. My mother-in-law's sharp voice rang out. With a loud bang, the bathroom door was forced open. Theo rushed in and saw me slumped on the floor, the pool of blood near his feet, and the needle pulled out on the bedsheet. His face instantly turned extremely grim. He quickly stepped forward and grabbed my arm. Elena. You're crazy. Do you know what you're doing? He was very strong, squeezing me painfully. I raised my head, looked at his face filled with concern and anger, and suddenly laughed. What am I doing? Theo, why don't you ask yourself what you're doing? I pointed to the 4 bottles still on the nightstand. What's in that? Nutrient solution? Do you think I'm stupid? What exactly is that? Why did you want to kill our child? I almost shouted. Theo's expression froze, and the panic in his eyes quickly turned into heartbreak. Elena, calm down, it's not what you think. He tried to hold me, but I pushed him away. Not what I thought. Then what is it? Tell me. My mother-in-law stood at the doorway, watching our performance coldly. Theo, why waste words on her? Since she's asking for trouble herself, just let her. Mom. Theo abruptly cut her off, turning to look at her. The mother-in-law's face changed, and she finally closed her mouth, but the resentment in her eyes remained undiminished. Theo turned back, a pained expression appearing on his face. He knelt down, took my hand, and said in a hoarse voice, Elena, I'm sorry, I've been keeping this from you. We are indeed expecting twins. My heart skipped a beat. But. He took a deep breath, his eyes reddening. Through the most advanced genetic screening, we found that the boy has a very severe congenital heart defect. The doctor said he wouldn't live past a year old. Moreover, his existence would seriously affect the other healthy baby, and even you. That's why, we decided to keep only the healthy one. He spoke with tears streaming down his face, but I could sense the hidden satisfaction within him. What a load of bullshit. My heartbeat is stronger than anyone's. He's just looking for an excuse to kill me. The fierce voice, though weak, was full of confidence. Watching him calmly weave lies without changing expression, my heart turned cold. I lowered my head, letting my shoulders tremble, pretending to cry. Really? Our baby, he. I was sobbing uncontrollably, my body trembling. Theo immediately pulled me into his arms, gently patting my back. I'm sorry, Elena. I didn't want to upset you, which is why I kept it from you. We did it for your sake, for the sake of our healthy baby. As I lay in his arms, I caught a glimpse of my mother-in-law at the doorway. The tight lines on her face finally relaxed, and she gave the family doctor a knowing look. They all thought I believed it. I continued to cry sadly, but my mind was racing. A heart defect? Such a clumsy lie. But why would they lie about it? Why were they so determined to get rid of the boy and keep the girl? Brother, are you really going to die? The soft, tearful voice sounded utterly heartbroken. Don't listen to his nonsense. The fierce voice carried a hint of impatience, but more than that, reassurance. We are twins, a boy and a girl. They are not afraid of me getting sick, they are afraid of me. Afraid of him? Why would anyone fear an unborn baby? Behind this, there must be a bigger secret hidden. From that day on, I changed. I no longer resisted, no longer refused to eat, and even began to cooperate actively with my mother-in-law and the nutritionist. I drank the soup my mother-in-law gave me with a smile on my face, then went to the bathroom and threw it all up. Theo came to see me, and I greeted him warmly, playing the role of a wife who had already accepted the harsh reality and was ready to live well for the remaining child. My compliance made them let their guard down. The surveillance on me was still there, but it had clearly slackened a lot. I finally had some breathing room to think. I started paying attention to the idle chatter among the maids in the villa. They dared not discuss the master's affairs openly, but from the scattered words, I managed to piece together some information. I heard the old master set some strange rules back in the day. That's right, that's why the eldest young master. Shoo, stop talking. Be careful not to let the mistress hear. The old master's rules? The eldest young master? I keenly seized these two keywords. Theo is the only son of the Harrington family. Where did this young master come from? I need a breakthrough, someone who can tell me the whole truth. I thought of someone, Grace. Grace is an old servant of the Harrington family, having worked for the Harringtons for nearly 40 years, watching Theo grow up. A while ago, due to my age, my mother-in-law granted me permission to retire, and I returned to my hometown. She probably thought that a dismissed old servant wouldn't cause much trouble. But I remember that Grace had a grandson who was admitted to university the year before last, and tuition has always been a challenge. I found an opportunity and sneaked into Theo's study while the new maid was dozing off. I used his computer to log into a website I had memorized long ago, which specifically handles gray market transactions. Using a diamond earring I had secretly hidden away as payment, I posted a task: find Grace and have her contact me. Money and diamonds are the most effective currency in this world. In less than 24 hours, I received a response. The other party gave me an encrypted messaging app account and a scheduled time. The next afternoon, I made an excuse that I wanted to sunbathe in the garden. My mother-in-law probably thought I had been behaving myself lately and, with the 2 bodyguards accompanying me, she agreed. I sat on the rattan chair in the garden, covering my legs and hands with a blanket. Under the blanket's concealment, I took out an old phone that belonged to one of the nannies. I had no idea when I had pilfered and hidden it, and logged into the encrypted software. As soon as the time came, a video call request popped up. I clicked to answer. A pale and familiar face appeared on the screen. It was Grace. She looked somewhat flustered and afraid upon seeing me. Why, young mistress. Grace, don't be afraid. I just want to ask you a few things, I said, my voice low and my words quick. I will cover all tuition and living expenses for your grandson for the next 4 years. I have only one request: tell me what secrets the Harrington family is hiding. Grace trembled all over, her cloudy eyes filled with struggle. The temptation of money, combined with the pleas of this pitiful young mistress, finally made her make up her mind. Madam, listen, I'll tell you everything. Her voice trembled. Before the old master of the Harrington family passed away, he invited a highly skilled fortune-teller to perform a reading. The fortune-teller said that the fortune of the Harrington family was unique, strong in yin and weak in yang, and that only by having a woman in charge could the family prosper and flourish without decline. If a male were to inherit the family, within 3 generations, the family would surely be ruined and scattered. So the old master left a will stating that everything in the Harrington family could only be inherited by the eldest daughter. An eldest son was considered an ominous sign. My heart sank heavily. Then, what will happen to the eldest son? Grace's face turned deathly pale, and her lips trembled. When the old master was alive, he was kind-hearted. He only sent the newborn eldest son away to a far-off place, never allowing him to return for a lifetime. But by Madam's generation, the first child she gave birth to, it was also a boy. The one everyone calls the eldest young master. That child didn't live long after birth, passed away early. Grace's voice was filled with fear. Publicly, we said it was due to frailty, but in truth, it was actually the mistress herself who. She was afraid the child would affect Master Theo's position, and even more afraid that the uncles and elders in the family would force her with ancestral teachings. It was as if I had been struck by lightning, and my whole body turned cold. To do it with her own hands. That woman, whom I respectfully called Mom every day, actually killed her own child with her own hands. What about Theo? Why did he? Theo, the young master, is the second son, so he doesn't count. That's why he could grow up safely and inherit the family business. Grace sighed, but now, you are pregnant. And the first one is a boy. Finally, I understood. Everything became clear. They weren't afraid that my son might be sick, they were afraid he would live. His very existence was a challenge to the Harrington family's ancestral teachings and a threat to his sister. In order to preserve the Harrington family's legacy and ensure that her future granddaughter would smoothly inherit everything, my mother-in-law plans to repeat her old tricks. She wants to get rid of my son. And Theo, my husband, has known all along. He's an accomplice. All his fabricated lies, all his hypocritical tears, they were just meant to keep me calm, so they could quietly kill the child in my belly. A wave of nausea surged up my throat. I hung up the phone, rushed to the flower bed, and vomited until everything went dark. What I spit out was all the remaining beautiful fantasies about this marriage and this man. Now you finally know, the fierce baby said coldly inside my belly. So, what will you do next? Continue being the foolish woman who lets herself be trampled all over? I wiped the stains from the corner of my mouth and straightened my body. The sunlight shone on me, yet there wasn't a hint of warmth. The thought of having to fight against the entire Harrington family while pregnant overwhelmed me with fear, like icy seawater. Yet every kick from the children in my womb reminded me that I couldn't give up. I would no longer allow myself to be trampled upon. If they wanted to kill my son, then I would escape this hell with my children. I returned to the room, my face regaining its calm. From this moment on, every word I say, everything I do, is an act. The little strategist in my belly has become my only ally. You foolish woman, if you want to live, listen to me. His voice carried a trace of impatience. That old witch's malice is too strong, her emotions stab at me like needles. Based on his perception and my daytime observations, we pieced together an escape plan. The far right corner of the backyard wall was a blind spot I discovered during my walks. The spare key to the nanny van in the garage was something my son heard from the servants' idle chatter. As for the timing of my mother-in-law's medication and the rotation schedule of the bodyguards, I deliberately observed and recorded them over the past few weeks while pretending to comply. My son can sense the brief breath window when the bodyguards change shifts at 3 in the morning. Those 5 minutes are the only chance. I began making preparations for my escape. I pretended to have a poor appetite, leaving a lot of food untouched every day. Then, while the nanny wasn't looking, she secretly hid some bread and chocolate in an inconspicuous cloth bag. I also asked the family doctor for some sleeping pills on the grounds of soothing my nerves. Of course, I didn't take them. Instead, I ground them into powder and hid them away. Everything was ready. I just needed to wait for the right moment. A stormy night would provide the best cover. I checked the weather forecast every day, and finally, the opportunity arrived. The forecast says there will be a thunderstorm on Thursday night. On Thursday evening, as usual, after finishing dinner, I watched my mother-in-law take her blood pressure medication. At 9:30, she yawned and went back to her room to sleep. At 10 o'clock, I saw from the window that the driver had indeed appeared at the garage entrance right on time, lighting a cigarette. My heart rose to my throat. Time passed minute by minute. Late into the night, outside the window, the wind howled and thunder roared. I lay in bed, listening to the footsteps of the bodyguards pacing outside. At 2:50 a.m., I quietly got up, mixed the pre-prepared sleeping pill powder into a glass of water, and opened the bedroom door. The 2 bodyguards at the door saw me and immediately became alert. "Young madam, where are you going?" "I'm a bit thirsty. I'd like to go downstairs to pour a glass of water." I gave a soft, delicate smile. They exchanged glances, and one of them followed me. I walked to the kitchen and, right in front of him, poured 2 glasses of water. I handed one to him. "You've worked hard. Have a glass of water." The other glass, I slowly drank for myself. He probably thought a pregnant woman couldn't cause much trouble. After hesitating for a moment, he took it and drank it. I watched him finish it, counting the seconds in my heart. Back in my room, I lay on the bed, my heart pounding wildly. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. The sound of patrol footsteps outside gradually grew sluggish and irregular. Then, everything fell silent. 3 in the morning, it was time for the shift change. I heard a faint conversation outside the door, followed by a muffled groan as the guard struggled before falling, and then everything fell silent. I immediately jumped out of bed, grabbed the hidden cloth bag, and opened the window. My room was on the 2nd floor, not too high. I gritted my teeth, tore the bedsheet into strips, twisted them into a rope, and tied one end to the heating pipe. The cold rain instantly soaked my face. I gripped the fabric strips, clumsily climbing down. 8 months pregnant, my center of gravity was unstable. A fierce gust of wind blew, my foot slipped, the bed sheet tied to the heating pipe let out a harsh screech, and I was left hanging in midair. My heavy belly suddenly dropped, the sensation of weightlessness making my heart stop. The rough fabric strips dug deep into my palms, grinding flesh and skin into a bloody mess. "Brother!" My daughter's soft whimper, filled with terror, was like a frightened kitten. This gentle call filled me with more despair than any torture, yet made me more determined. I gritted my teeth hard, enduring the piercing pain, not daring to stop. Finally, my foot touched the slippery grass. I didn't dare look back. Following my son's instructions from my belly, I pressed against the wall and fumbled all the way to the blind spot of the backyard surveillance. Then, holding my breath, I dashed across the open yard and ran toward the garage. The garage door wasn't locked. I pulled open the car door and climbed into the black van. It suddenly occurred to me, I had overheard the maid, Xiao Tsue, complaining while cleaning earlier. Saying that the driver always liked to tape the spare key under the driver's seat, nearly causing her to lose it several times. I reached out and felt underneath the driver's seat. Sure enough, I touched the cold spare key. Just as I was about to insert the key into the ignition, a light cough came from not far away. It seemed to be one of the night watch guards. I froze instantly, holding my breath. After waiting for more than 10 seconds without any further movement, I tremblingly started the car. The engine failed to start on the first try. On the second attempt, it roared with a violent noise, sounding like a thunderclap in the silent, rainy night. I am free. I stomp on the accelerator, and the car shoots out of the Harrington family gate like an arrow from a bow, merging into the pitch-black rainy night. I don't dare to stop, racing on. I don't know where to go. All I know is that I need to get as far away from that place as possible. Intense nervousness and violent shaking made my stomach start to ache faintly. Thump after thump, growing more and more frequent. I realized I was going into labor. I was in so much pain that I was drenched in sweat, and my vision kept blacking out. Summoning the last ounce of my strength, I took out that old phone and called Chloe. Chloe, help me. I'm on the Ring Expressway. After saying those words, I could no longer hold on and completely lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was already in the hospital. The harsh white lights, the strong smell of disinfectant. Chloe was sitting by my bedside, her eyes red and swollen. Seeing me awake, she grabbed my hand. Elena. You finally woke up. You scared me to death. My baby? I asked anxiously. The baby is fine. The doctor said you just had some movement in the womb and need bed rest to protect the pregnancy. Fortunately, we got here in time. I breathed a sigh of relief. Finally did something smart. Inside my stomach, that fierce voice also sounded a bit weary. Only then did I relax and begin to survey my surroundings. It was a private room, likely in a public hospital. Chloe, thank you. What's there to thank between us? More importantly, what exactly happened? How did you end up driving alone on the highway late at night? Where's Theo? At the mention of Theo, my eyes turned cold. I was just about to tell her everything when the door to the ward was suddenly pushed open. Theo and my mother-in-law stood at the doorway, with the 2 bodyguards behind them. Their expressions were utterly grim. Especially my mother-in-law, whose glare looked as if she wanted to devour me alive. Elena, you're really something. She gritted her teeth and said, You dare to run away from home? Your courage is really growing. Theo quickly walked to my bedside, wearing an expression I knew all too well, one of deep sorrow and heartache. Elena, don't be difficult. Come home with us. Your body needs rest right now. He reached out to pull me, but I recoiled sharply, as if stung by a scorpion. Go home? Back to that hellhole that wants to kill my child? I looked at him coldly. Theo's face turned pale. Chloe was confused by what she heard, but instinctively stepped in front of me. Theo, what do you mean? What do you mean by killing the child? My mother-in-law impatiently stepped forward and pushed Chloe aside. This has nothing to do with you. Theo, don't waste time talking to her, just take her away. She gave a signal to the 2 bodyguards, who immediately stepped forward and seized me, one on each side. What are you doing? Let go of me. This is a hospital. I struggled and shouted. Chloe also rushed forward to try to stop them, but was roughly pushed to the ground by another bodyguard. Chloe. I watched helplessly as they tried to drag me away, a wave of despair washing over me. After all my efforts to escape, was I still doomed to fall into their hands in the end? Just then, a calm voice came from the entrance of the ward. What seems to be going on here? Several police officers in uniform walked in, followed by a group of reporters carrying an array of cameras. Camera flashes instantly lit up the room, snapping photos of us frantically. Theo and my mother-in-law's expressions changed instantly. Who allowed you in here? Get out, my mother-in-law shrieked, losing her composure. A reporter who looked like the leader handed a microphone in front of me. Elena, we received a tip that you were illegally imprisoned by the Harrington family, and that your husband and mother-in-law attempted to harm the fetus in your womb. Is this true? Looking at Theo and my mother-in-law's instantly pale faces, I knew my opportunity had come. All of this was part of my plan. On the night I escaped, using that old phone, I not only contacted Chloe, but I also anonymously sent everything I knew, along with the recording of that phone call with Grace, to one of the most famous media outlets in the city. I bet they would come for the top headline. I bet right. I looked at Theo, took a deep breath, and faced the camera, tears streaming down my face. Yes, it's all true. My husband Theo and my mother-in-law want to kill the son in my womb because of an absurd ancestral rule from the Harrington family. I publicly revealed the Harrington family's secret: only daughters inherit, the firstborn son is unlucky, in front of all the media. I even presented that recording as evidence. The venue erupted in uproar. Reporters, like sharks drawn to the scent of blood, turned their microphones and cameras toward Theo and his mother. Theo, is what your wife said true? Theo's mother, rumor has it that you also gave birth to a boy back then. May I ask, did that child also die prematurely because of the ancestral decree? My mother-in-law was questioned until her face turned ashen and her lips trembled, unable to utter a single word. Her face turned from ashen to pale, her lips trembling as if trying to say something, but in the end, she only let out a beast-like roar before collapsing stiffly, like a withered log. The scene immediately descended into chaos. Theo stared at me intently, his eyes filled with shock, disbelief, and the anger of being humiliated. He probably never expected that his once soft and obedient wife, whom he had always controlled, would deal him such a fatal blow. Elena, you. He pointed at me, too furious to speak. What about me? I wiped away my tears and sneered, I'm just a mother trying to protect her child. Officer, I need to report a crime. They have engaged in illegal detention and intentional harm. I demand an immediate investigation into their actions. The police officers stepped forward and took control of the Harrington family bodyguards, who had already lost their composure. And him. I pointed at the family doctor in the crowd, his face pale as a sheet. He's the accomplice who drugged me. The police immediately approached, placing him under control along with the bodyguards. Theo stared at me intensely before being taken away by the police. That gaze no longer held any pretense, leaving only sheer resentment and a chilling intent to kill. I had no mind to analyze it. The overwhelming shock and emotional turbulence sent a sharp, wrenching pain through my stomach. Doctor! Doctor! The patient is going into labor! Chloe screamed. I was rushed into the delivery room at lightning speed. In my final moments of fading consciousness, I seemed to hear that fierce baby let out a soft snort. Well done. I stayed in the hospital for half a month. During that time, the world outside turned upside down. The kill the son and pass it to the daughter scandal of the Harrington family became the biggest news nationwide. The stock price of Harrington Holdings plummeted, on the verge of bankruptcy. My mother-in-law was formally arrested on suspicion of intentional homicide, her son from 30 years ago. My mother-in-law suffered a sudden cardiac arrest on the spot and was rushed to the emergency room. The media uncovered the truth about the eldest young master's death from 30 years ago. It wasn't frail and died young, but the mother-in-law personally smothered him to death with a pillow. All the evidence, the family doctor responsible for destroying it, the servants, even the hospital records, was brought to light. The first thing she faced upon waking was an arrest warrant for intentional homicide. In the detention center, her hair turned white overnight. She was no longer the high and mighty matriarch of the Harrington family, but merely a forsaken old woman scorned by the world. What awaited her was the severe punishment of the law. As an accomplice, Theo was also detained for investigation. The entire Harrington family had crumbled and fallen apart. And I, at the heart of the storm, gave birth to a pair of healthy boy-girl twins. The older sister is very quiet, sleeping most of the time like a little angel. The younger brother, however, is full of energy, with his dark, bright eyes wide open every day, curiously observing the world around him. I named him Alexander. I hope he stays safe and sound for the rest of his life. The older sister is named Amelia. May she live a peaceful and joyful life. Chloe spends almost every day at the hospital keeping me company. Elena, you're a celebrity now. Everyone says you're the model of a modern woman, tearing down the wealthy for the sake of your child. She gossips while peeling an apple. I smile but say nothing. I'm no model, I'm just a mother. The day I was discharged, many people came to pick me up. My parents, and Chloe. When my parents saw the pair of babies in my arms, they were so moved their eyes turned red. Just glad you're back, so glad you're back. Mom hugged me, her voice choked up. Looking at the new strands of white hair at their temples, a wave of sorrow washed over me. During this time, we had them worried. We did not return to the nightmare-filled Harrington family, but instead moved into a new apartment I had bought with my pre-marriage savings. Sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything was new and full of hope. A month later, Theo was released. Insufficient evidence. He's very clever. All the dirty deeds were carried out by his mother and his subordinates. From start to finish, he presented himself as a dutiful son who was kept in the dark and pressured. He came to see me. That afternoon, I was breastfeeding the children. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw him. He had lost weight and looked haggard, no longer possessing the spirited appearance he once had. I hesitated for a moment, but eventually opened the door. We stood separated by a security door, staring at each other in silence. "Can I see the child?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I stepped aside, allowing him to see the two babies in the crib. His gaze fell upon the faces of the two children, complex emotions flickered, only to be quickly replaced by indifference. "Elena, have you had enough?" he spoke coldly. "Destroying the Harrington family, do you think that makes you the winner?" I looked at him, not a single ripple in my heart. "Let's get a divorce." He suddenly laughed, his eyes turning fierce. "Divorce? Fine. But the children belong to the Harrington family, and you won't be taking a single one." I looked at his distorted face and suddenly smiled. Tell him that he fabricated evidence of project losses to frame Uncle in order to drive him out, and it's still in the third safe in the study of the old mansion. My son's cold voice echoed in my mind. I stared at Theo and repeated it word for word. The ferocity on his face instantly froze, turning into fear and disbelief. How do you know?" I didn't answer, just watched him calmly. "I only want the child, and for you to leave with nothing. Otherwise, this evidence will appear at the police station tomorrow." He glared at me so fiercely it felt like he was trying to burn two holes through me. In the end, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and all his anger completely faded. I calmly closed the door, shutting his despair out. Leaning back against the door, I let out a long, relieved sigh. The sunlight streamed in just right, filling the room with the scent of milk and the soft sound of the baby breathing. My Alexander and Amelia are sleeping peacefully. I walked to the crib, leaned down, and kissed their little faces. At that very moment, I heard a clear, cold, and resolute voice. "He won't have another chance." It was Alexander's voice. I paused for a moment, then smiled. Yes, we will never give anyone the chance to hurt us again. Later, Theo's name only appeared in the corners of financial news. He tried to make a comeback, rallying his former allies. My son, Alexander, was just babbling and blowing bubbles, but in my mind, his cold voice echoed. He arranged to meet Marcus at Blue Night to use the money in his overseas account as collateral. The next day, the tax authorities froze that account. He planned to start anew by stealing trade secrets. Alexander yawned. "Fool, the USB drive is hidden under the office plant pot." The police quickly found evidence in his office. In the end, Theo was sentenced to prison again for commercial fraud and theft of confidential information, never to have a chance to turn his life around. On the day of the trial, he sat in the defendant's seat, wearing a prisoner's uniform. His once gentle face twisted like a stranger's. I sat in the gallery holding my two children, watching him calmly. When the judge read the verdict, he seemed to have all his energy drained away. Intentional injury, unlawful detention, conspiracy to commit murder, combined charges, 15 years in prison. After the sentencing, as he was being led away by the bailiffs, he suddenly rushed over to me, eyes red and roaring. Elena. You've destroyed me. You've destroyed the Harrington family. You'll regret this. I lowered my head and kissed the sleeping Alexander in my arms, smiling softly. Regret? No, the best thing I've ever done in my life was sending you to prison. At the moment he was dragged away, Alexander opened his eyes in my arms, his dark, gleaming pupils fixed on the direction of his departure. Snorted, with a childish voice. His familiar, cold, and smug voice rang clearly in my mind, "You fool, don't even think about coming out for the rest of your life." Harrington Holdings officially announced bankruptcy liquidation 3 months after the scandal broke. All those relatives and business partners who once flattered him scattered like birds and beasts. The old mansion was auctioned off to compensate for the enormous fines and victim settlement funds. The once unrivaled Harrington family was completely removed from the list of prominent families in this city. And me? I moved into a sunny new home with Alexander and Amelia. With the money I received from the divorce settlement, I opened a small maternity and baby workshop to help those pregnant and postpartum women who have suffered domestic violence and control. Every time a woman holds her child and tearfully tells me, "Thank you for saving me," I recall the moment I pulled the needle out in the bathroom all those years ago. It turns out a mother's anger can be so powerful. In the 3rd year of Theo's imprisonment, I received a letter from the prison. The letter paper was crumpled, the handwriting scrawled. He wrote, he regretted it, he missed his child, he was willing to reform, just asking me to take our child to see him once. I showed the letter to Alexander. He was only 3 at the time, sitting on the carpet building with blocks. He glanced at the letter and said in his childish voice, "Burn it." I smiled, tossing the letter into the fireplace right in front of him. The flames danced, illuminating the innocent smiles of the 2 children. From that day on, Theo's name never appeared in my home again. My Alexander and Amelia grew up under the sun. The older brother, clever and domineering, was a fierce protector of his sister, never letting anyone bully her. My sister is gentle and considerate, like a little cotton-padded jacket, always cleaning up after her brother whenever he gets into trouble. They will never know that there was once a cage called the Harrington family, which almost destroyed all 3 of us. All they need to know is, Mom loves them very much, the world is safe, and everyone who tried to hurt them has already paid the price. Standing on the balcony, I watch the 2 children chasing and playing on the lawn, their shadows stretching long and long in the setting sun. The wind blows over, carrying the scent of flowers and the laughter of children. Finally, I can laugh out loud without any burden. In this round, I won thoroughly. It was satisfying. It was vindicating.